Good Friday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, blocked. President Biden dealing with two big blows this morning. One from the Supreme Court, which ruled against the president's sweeping COVID vaccine mandate for the workplace, shutting down a key part of his plan to overcome the virus. And on Capitol Hill, President Biden failing to unite his own party to pass new voting rights legislation after key Democrat Kyrsten Sinema said she would not support removing the filibuster to get it done. The president now vowing to regroup and try again.
As long as I have a breath in me, as long as I'm in the White House, as long as I'm engaged at all, I'm going to be fighting to change the way these legislatures have moved.
We have team coverage with the latest on the setbacks, the fallout, and what it all means for the Biden agenda. Seditious conspiracy charges against the leader of a far-right group for his alleged role in the Capitol insurrection. More on his arrest and the arrests of 10 other people more than 1 year after the attack. Weekend warning. Millions of people bracing for another major winter storm with heavy snow and ice expected to slam much of the eastern half of the country. We're tracking the storm's latest path. And home sweet boat. A woman gives up life on land to live on the water full time. She'll join us to talk about the sacrifices she's had to make for the lifestyle change and why she says it's all worth it. You can probably imagine some of those sacrifices have to do with the bathroom and heating.
I would think, but we'll find out. We have a lot of questions.
Yeah, exactly. All right. We begin this morning, though, with a big loss for the Biden administration in the Supreme Court and its efforts to enforce sweeping COVID vaccine mandates for large private companies.
It was a 6-3 ruling. The court, led by its conservative majority, wrote that OSHA, that's the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, did not have the power to regulate public health. In a statement, the Biden administration said it was disappointed by the ruling, arguing that if his administration had not put vaccination requirements in place, quote, we would be now experiencing a higher death toll from COVID-19 and even more hospitalizations. Here to help us break down the ruling and what it means moving forward, we've got NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos and Dr. Bob Lahita. He's a professor at the Hackensack Meridian Medical School and the director of autoimmune and rheumatic diseases at St. Joseph Health. He's also the author of Immunity Strong. Good morning to both of you. Danny, we'll start with you. The ruling comes just 3 days after the mandate went into effect. Talk to us about the reasoning behind the Supreme Court's decision and what impact it could have on any future legal challenges to vaccine mandates.
The court essentially concluded that OSHA overstepped its bounds. No surprise when you consider a justice like Gorsuch's history. This is something that Gorsuch has always been cautious of, is what he called the regulatory behemoth, the idea that the regulatory agencies of this country, who are not elected and who don't go through a democratic process in order to create law, simply create rules that govern the country. And so no surprise, if you've been following Gorsuch's career, that this is an opinion that would come from a court upon which he sits. Basically, the reasoning is that OSHA has a job to regulate workplace safety. COVID-19 affects people everywhere, irrespective of being at work, whether they're on the street, whether they're anywhere, whether they don't have a job at all. And so for that reason, OSHA overstepped its bounds when it went from just regulating safety measures at work to regulating public health generally. And for that reason, the mandate's put on hold. It's not struck down. It's not gone forever. That seems to be the Supreme Court's increasing role these days, is ruling on temporary restraining orders and injunctive relief, which really just hits a pause button until the issue is resolved at the court below.
So, Dr. Bob, I mean, we're dealing with a record surge in cases due to the Omicron variant right now. What are your thoughts on this ruling when it comes to public health? What might be the impact?
The impact is going to be great, Joe, because most hospitals, I would say virtually 99.9% of the hospitals in the country are taking Medicaid and Medicare funding. So they would be under this rule, and that all employees, that's all employees of any hospital, will have to be vaccinated protectively. Now, doctors' offices take Medicare and some take Medicaid, and clinics do too. And I don't know how the ruling is going to affect private physicians and their care of patients. That's interesting. Then the second point is Police and fire do not take government funds unless they're in a specific category, and neither do EMS people. But some EMS programs do take Medicaid and Medicare funds for their transports, for example, critical care transport. So they're going to be under the gun as well.
Yeah, I want to talk more about what you're talking about there. It was a separate 5-4 decision from the Supreme Court. They did allow a similar vaccine mandate to stand for medical facilities that take Medicare or Medicaid payments. So, Danny, I'll ask you, talk to us about the reasoning behind the court's split decision on both of these mandates, why they were okay with one but not the other.
The power of the spending power. It's nothing like the Commerce Clause power, but quietly the federal government can regulate what a lot of people do in the states using the power of the purse. And this is no exception. The court is essentially saying that facilities that accept money from the federal government in the form of Medicare or Medicaid do have to comply with vaccine mandates. And that, of course, is a separate issue than simply OSHA broadly saying that thou shalt have either testing or be vaccinated. It's a separate analysis, but basically the court is saying that as long as these facilities are willing to accept the money, then they have to comply with the rules that come along with that money. So not a big surprise there. The court, at least in the last decade or so, has been increasingly accepting of the spending power and actually giving it a pretty broad interpretation.
So, Dr. Bob, let's talk more about that decision. It's going to cover 17 million healthcare workers in 76,000 medical facilities. We know, you know better than any of us, the medical field has been dealing with a shortage in healthcare workers. Do you think this ruling has any impact on that shortage? Are we at the point now where most healthcare workers are vaccinated? What do you think could be the impact of this?
It depends on the institution, Joe. We have mandated the flu vaccine, for example, for many, many years. But right now, this is going to result in a lot of healthcare workers, doctors and nurses resigning or being terminated from their positions. Not so much a big problem in the Northeast, where these mandates have been in place for many years, but in other parts of the country, rural hospitals, for example, and in those states which are not really highly vaccinated, this could have a major impact on staffing.
Yep, good point. That's exactly where we could see the biggest impact of this. All right, Danny Ceballos, Dr. Bob Lahita, thanks so much for helping us break down these big court decisions.
Now, the White House has announced new points of focus as they try to lead the charge on controlling the spread of the very contagious Omicron variant. The U.S. recorded another million COVID cases in the past day, bringing the total now to 64 million cases since the pandemic began. Health experts are now telling us to upgrade our masks, and President Biden says there's a plan to make more high-quality masks like those N95s we're talking about again available for free. This comes as hospitals are overwhelmed, especially in the 6 states you'll see on a map here. Federal medical teams are now on their way to hospitals there, giving healthcare workers some much-needed relief. There's that map. Now, yesterday, the president addressed the frustration a lot of Americans are feeling right now about the pandemic.
You know, we're all frustrated as we enter this new year. Omicron variant is causing millions of cases and record hospitalizations. But as long as we have tens of millions of people who will not get vaccinated, we're going to have full hospitals and needless deaths.
NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton is joining us from one of the hospitals who's going to get federal help. That's in Coney Island Hospital in Brooklyn, New York. And NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman is following these latest developments out of the White House on its response. Good morning to both of you. Antonia, I'll begin with you. So first, just tell us what kind of help is on the way to the hospital where you're at.
Good morning, Savannah. So I'm here at Coney Island Hospital, and they are one of these 6 hospitals in various states that is receiving one of these military medical surge teams starting on Monday of next week. And what it's going to look like is teams of 20 or more people coming in and essentially joining the hospital staff here. It's going to include physicians, nurses, technicians, clinicians who are going to jump in right into the everyday operations to help hospitals like this one really survive the next 30 days or months. They're going to be on the ground for about a month-long period. And the idea here, right, is that because of the surge in cases, but also really critically, the overwhelming of the operations here at hospitals like Coney Island Hospital, where there have been staff members who have taken early retirement, people reporting extreme burnout, and then also staff members catching Omicron themselves and not able to come to work and actually do critical life-saving services here. The idea is that these folks from the military surge team are going to come in and help float the hospital through these next critical 4 weeks or so. Savannah?
Now, Josh, let's talk about some of the federal response here. This is just the latest form of federal help. Hospitals are getting these boots on the ground. But what else has the government done to help hospitals in this surge, and what else could be coming?
Yeah, Savannah, these teams are part of a joint military operation that the Pentagon has actually had up and running since August. And the numbers have ebbed and flowed. They're U.S. Air Force, Army, as well as Navy forces. Right now, it's about 630 or so. But in December, President Biden announced another 1,000 troops would be going to hospitals in need as they anticipated this crisis we're facing right now with Omicron. So these teams at the hospitals, including the one where Antonia is at right now, are the first batch as part of that surge of forces. We'll see more teams deployed in the coming weeks. The Biden administration, through the massive COVID spending bills that were passed last year, has also provided hundreds of billions of dollars in aid to hospitals that are in crisis right now. But President Biden says the real issue here is not the money, but the unvaccinated. Take a look.
Unfortunately, while our military is stepping up, as they always do, there are others sitting on the sidelines, and we're standing in the way. If you haven't gotten vaccinated, do it. Personal choice impacts us all, our hospitals, our countries.
But the reality is, Savannah, President Biden keeps beating this drum of we need to get the unvaccinated to get that shot. But he just lost one of his most important tools to do that in that mandate the Supreme Court put away, as Joe was just discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Antonia, where you are in New York, that's, of course, not the only area where hospitals are feeling the strain. It's happening across the country, including in our neighboring New Jersey. A hospital there is also going to get federal medical team to them. How do they plan on using that team?
That's right, and that is University Hospital in Newark. And what they say is that they expect this surge team to come in and become a seamless part of their operation. So if you're a patient or person visiting the hospital, the idea is you almost wouldn't notice that they're there because they're filling already critical positions. You know, again, these are physicians and nurses and clinicians, real healthcare workers with the skills to triage patients, to run everyday hospital functioning. And that's what they really need. I mean, the CEO of the hospital has described them as bursting at the seams. And so this is really critical care. And the idea is that you're going to see them looking like the same nurses and doctors who are supposed to be there every day in and out, but who right now are in many cases sick themselves and unable to support critical functions. Take a listen to Dr. Sharif El-Nahal. He's the president and CEO of University Hospital, and he talks a bit about the meaning of this help they're about to receive.
It's all hands on deck. We're going to be deploying them strategically where we're hurting the most. So the emergency room, for example, making sure that we're staffed up in our intensive care units, and really whatever the skills that these folks come with. A lot of hospitals are in a similar position to us. We serve a very vulnerable community here. We are bursting at the seams. And again, could not be more grateful for this.
And what's critical to know, too, is, right, this is Newark. I'm here in Brooklyn, and these are hospitals that are serving, you know, really diverse communities that have been hit the hardest by COVID, often seen some of the most challenging outcomes. And so the support they're about to receive from the federal government, they are saying that they're incredibly grateful because it's not just about their hospital functioning, but it's also about helping and surging resources to the most needy communities. Savannah.
Yeah, Josh, let's talk about a couple more of those resources, which are those high-quality masks, as well as tests that Americans can request online. There was really some vagueness around this for a while, but we do have a better idea of when that will be available. What did the president say?
Well, at least we know now, Savannah, that the president has a plan or is going to have a plan to get free N95 high-quality masks to Americans who need them. We don't know exactly what that plan is, other than that President Biden says we'll know more about it next week. Ostensibly, it would look something like the program that they are also in the middle of putting together to distribute free COVID-19 home test kits to Americans who request it through a website. We know that according to the White House, by the end of next week, they expect to have taken delivery of that first batch of 500 million tests that President Biden has ordered. Yesterday, he announced another 500 million are also in the works, and we expect that by the end of the month, the first of those COVID-19 home tests will be in the mail to Americans.
All right, Josh and Antonia, thank you so much for your coverage this morning. Now, as you have noticed, we cover a lot of COVID news every day. We talk to a lot of doctors, and we know you have questions about the pandemic, whether it's about this variant, vaccines, or masks. Maybe you're still thinking about getting your first dose. We have doctors on our show ready to answer your questions. So email us. You can see it there on the screen, morningnewsnow@nbcuni.com with your questions. And thank you to those of us who have already done so. We love getting answers for you. You can also let us know if you want to stay anonymous when you're asking that question.
We're following major new developments in the January 6th investigation. Federal prosecutors filed new charges against key members of one of the groups accused of playing a central role in the insurrection.
Yeah, investigators now say more violence was planned even after the attack. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams has more.
It's the most high-profile charge yet, stemming from the Capitol riot. Stuart Rhodes of Texas, the leader of the far-right Oath Keepers, is in federal custody, accused of conspiring with 10 other members of the group to carry out acts of violence to stop Congress from formally counting the Electoral College vote for president. They're charged with the crime of seditious conspiracy.
While all conspiracies are serious, a seditious conspiracy, an unusual federal charge, not often brought, is even more serious.
As early as 2 days after the election, prosecutors say Rhodes reached out to his group's leadership team with this encrypted message: "We aren't getting through this without a civil war." In late December, court documents say he messaged the team, "We need to make those senators very uncomfortable with all of us being a few hundred feet away." The day before the riot, the FBI says one of the Oath Keepers drove around the U.S. Capitol on a reconnaissance mission. On January 6th, the government says as rioters began breaking through police lines, Rhodes messaged his leadership saying the nation's founders stormed the governor's mansion in Massachusetts. A short time later, Oath Keepers began working their way into the Capitol in two groups lined up in military-style formation. Stuart Rhodes remained outside the building, but in the hours after the riot, the government says he met with his team to plan further violence. In the following weeks, prosecutors say he spent more than $17,000 buying weapons and ammunition. And on Inauguration Day, they say Rhodes messaged, "After this, if nothing happens, it's war, Civil War 2.0. His lawyer says the evidence doesn't support the charge. Last year, Rhodes himself said members of his group went off mission by entering the Capitol, but that he never instructed them to do so.
All right, Pete, thanks so much. And now, while the FBI arrested the leader of the Oath Keepers yesterday, as you just saw, the House committee investigating the attack moved forward with their work as well.
The committee issued subpoenas to Twitter, Reddit, and the parent companies of Facebook and Google. The House panel wants those companies to provide more details on how their platforms spread misinformation in the days and weeks leading up to January 6th. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins us now. Leanne, good morning to you. So walk us through the details of these subpoenas. What exactly does the committee hope to learn? Are they focused on what the companies did do, what they didn't do?
All of the above, Joe. So this is a follow-up from an August 26th letter that the committee sent to these four companies, and actually more companies as well, asking for some of this information. Now, the committee says that after 4 months of negotiations with these four committees, they are unsatisfied, and so they are sending these subpoenas. And each company, what they want from it is a little bit different. From Reddit, for example, this is where the subreddit The Donald was, and where there was a lot of violent conspiracy theories on that subreddit. They want to know what YouTube did and what their algorithms are, as some of the people involved in January 6th used YouTube. But one thing that is underlining throughout all of these subpoena requests is that all four of these social media companies were readily used by people who were involved in January 6th or perhaps even planning January 6th. Joe, Savannah.
Leanne, let's now turn to something else that's brewing on the Hill. So this ongoing battle between the White House and Senators Sinema and Manchin over the voting rights legislation. So we now know both senators reiterated their opposition to killing the filibuster yesterday, something we've now heard President Biden say he would do. And this is even after President Biden took a trip to Capitol Hill. So what happens now? I mean, what do Senate Democrats plan on doing now to keep this legislation alive, given there's still this issue within their own party?
Yeah, well, they had a deadline of Martin Luther King Jr. Day to accomplish this. And there's been another thing that has been thrown at them. One of their members, Senator Brian Schatz, has gotten COVID. And so they don't even have 50 votes to even address this situation. So everything has been put off until next week. But even so, there is basically zero chance that they're going to be able to pass this legislation because they're not going to be able to pass these rules changes. This is what President Biden said leaving that closed-door meeting with Senate Democrats yesterday.
I hope we can get this done. The honest-to-God answer is I don't know whether we can get this done. As long as I have a breath in me, as long as I'm in the White House, as long as I'm engaged at all, I'm going to be fighting to change the way these legislatures have moved.
The reason is, of course, because Senators Sinema and Manchin came out saying that they would not support any rules changes that would enable the passage of voting rights legislation. Those two senators met with President Biden again last night. Very blunt and very short readout from that meeting, saying they just had a respectful discussion. Sounds like zero minds were changed. Savannah, Joe.
And Leanne, looking way ahead, we learned yesterday the Republican National Committee is considering withdrawing its candidates from taking part in presidential debates in the 2024 election. Quickly, what could this mean for presidential campaigns?
We don't know yet. Now, this is just a threat. Negotiations are ongoing, but there's been one person who has been critical of the Committee on Presidential Debates. That is former President Donald Trump. So this could be an effort to appease him. They say that the commission is rigged and partisan. So we'll see where these negotiations go. But this has been an institution running these debates for 3 decades.
All right, Leanne Caldwell, thanks so much.
Yep.
Let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather.
Meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now with the latest on that major winter storm expected to impact millions, sweep all over the country. Hey, Bill, good morning.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy 4 days. Good morning to you guys. Snow is already falling this morning. We got school delays in some areas, some cancellations, and we're pushing this storm from the plains today all the way through Martin Luther King Jr. Day on Monday into the Northeast. So we got quite a journey to go on here. So the snow this morning already breaking out in Minneapolis. Des Moines, the snow is starting along with Ames. So you got the idea of where the storm is going to hit. It's a narrow band through the northern plains. That pinkish, peachish color there, that's a winter storm warnings. That's where you're going to have the highest impacts from Fargo to Des Moines. And then everywhere in blue is under a winter storm watch. That's where we're still waiting to iron out the details exactly of what you're going to deal with. But for my friends in the Carolinas, ice is a big concern, mostly just going to be a snow issue from Memphis to Nashville, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Charleston, and in western portions of New York. So let's play this out. By the time we get through this evening, snowing pretty good in areas of southern Minnesota and in Iowa. We'll go from rain to snow tonight in Kansas City, St. Louis. And then tomorrow we'll watch rain to snow in areas like Little Rock. It's going to take a while, but we will get some snow in the backside after a rainy day in Memphis. Same for you in Nashville. As you wake up Sunday morning, you'll get some snow to deal with. Then Sunday, this is when the storm really blows up. It gets much bigger, heavy snow, a lot of travel issues in the Appalachians. Interstate 81, by far, it will be a very dangerous ride if you're going to try to do that. Probably advise not to as you go into Sunday. You notice the storm tracks along the coast, so that's mostly a rain event from D.C., Baltimore, Philly, New York, Providence up to Boston. Interior sections get the most snow. So as far as snow totals go, the blue is around 3 to 6 inches. Once you get to the purple, that's 9 inches. So a pretty good snowstorm there for Iowa today. Lesser amounts, Kansas City, St. Louis. And then the areas in the east, it's the Appalachians, West Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, Western New York, who really gets the higher totals. It's a quick burst of snow over to rain in areas, especially from D.C. to Boston. And I mentioned that ice, guys. If we're going to have any big problems that linger into the work week next week, it would be from power outages in the Carolinas. We are concerned, especially from Charlotte to Raleigh, Winston-Salem, Greensboro. Those are the areas we're most concerned with.
All right, we know you'll keep an eye on it. Bill, lots to cover. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you, Bill.
Coming up, His Royal Highness no more. Prince Andrew stripped of his royal and military titles as a civil sexual abuse lawsuit against him moves forward. We're going to have the latest from Buckingham Palace.
Also, another twist in the vaccine controversy involving tennis star Novak Djokovic. The overnight developments, that's next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. Prince Andrew has been stripped of his military affiliations with his mother, Queen Elizabeth's approval, after lawyers failed to persuade a U.S. judge to dismiss a civil lawsuit accusing him of sexual abuse.
Virginia Giuffre says the prince sexually abused her when she was 17 years old, an allegation Prince Andrew has repeatedly denied. NBC News senior international correspondent Keir Simmons has more.
Humiliation for the Queen's second son. Royal sources confirming to NBC News he will no longer be called His Royal Highness, a title he was born with. Buckingham Palace saying in a statement, with the Queen's approval and agreement, the Duke of York's military affiliations and royal patronages have been returned to the Queen. The statement ending, he is defending this case as a private citizen. Virginia Giuffre is suing Prince Andrew for alleged sexual assault when she was 17 years old. She says she was trafficked by the prince's friend, the late Jeffrey Epstein.
It was a really scary time in my life. I had just been abused by a member of a royal family.
The allegations continue despite Prince Andrew's years of denials, including saying he does not remember this photograph with Giuffre and Ghislaine Maxwell, who was convicted last month on federal sex trafficking charges.
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
The dramatic palace announcement comes a day after a US judge rejected the prince's bid to have the case thrown out, potentially leaving him to face cross-examination in court. This was a day the Queen wanted to avoid, but the palace clearly believes the damage to the royal family is too much. A source close to Prince Andrew says he will continue to defend himself, but it looks like he will have to do so alone.
Keir Simmons, thank you so much.
Let's now take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
NBC's Ali Arouzi joins us from Tehran. Ali, good morning.
Good morning, Joe, Savannah. Well, Australia's immigration minister has revoked tennis star Novak Djokovic's visa for a second time in a row over his right to remain in the country unvaccinated. The decision was taken by the ministry on health and good order grounds, which means Djokovic could be deported. However, the 34-year-old Serbian can still launch another legal challenge to remain in Australia. North Korea has fired a possible ballistic missile into the sea off the coast of Japan, which would be the country's third such launch in 2 weeks. The missile test comes just as the U.S. imposed fresh sanctions on North Korea. And it's not just the tennis that's getting people hot under the collar in Australia. Extreme weather has made the mercury hit 123 degrees there, matching the hottest temperature on record in the southern hemisphere. And those are your headlines, guys.
Ooh.
Wow, not exactly great tennis weather.
That is not comfortable. No.
All right, Ali, thank you so much.
Thank you. And coming up, new developments actually in the murder of Gabby Potito.
Why the police are now under fire for what a new investigation says they did and did not do in the days before she went missing. This is Morning News Now. A huge congratulations to all our friends on the Today Show this morning as the iconic program celebrates its 70th birthday. Back in 1952, NBC made history, becoming the first network to broadcast a morning show, a radical idea at the time. Dave Garroway opened the very first broadcast, setting the tone for generations to come. Since then, Today has covered nearly every major news event that's happened over the past 7 decades, giving viewers a front row seat to history. And the Today Show also made morning show history with the first female co-host, the first African-American anchor, and the first outdoor studio. Now, of course, the Today brand includes a streaming channel, website, social media, podcasts. You pretty much cannot escape it. Last night, the team celebrated the milestone watching the Empire State Building turn orange in honor of Today. There you see it. That is a big deal in New York, by the way. So
Yeah,
hard to imagine 70 years in television.
It really is. But did you see that last night, the Empire State Building?
No, this is the first time I've seen it.
I was able to see a little peek outside. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's right. It is a huge deal.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's an extra orange. So
Very neat. Congrats to
congratulations.
them. Now, we've got new information related to the murder of Gabby Potito. The story captured the nation, and you might remember body cam video from police officers stopping Potito and Brian Laundrie on the side of the road. Well, the police response shown in that video to the domestic violence incident between the couple is now being called a mistake. An independent investigation is pointing out that a report of the dispute should have been sent to prosecutors. It's raising more questions in an already complicated case. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett has the latest.
This is what I'm going to do. I've decided I am not going to cite you for domestic violence battery, okay?
That's a Moab, Utah police officer speaking with Gabby Potito and Brian Laundrie back in August 2021, weeks before Potito's body was found in Wyoming. It's this decision, the fact officers chose not to cite Potito for domestic violence, that's now being called a mistake. A review by an independent law enforcement agency found that officers made, quote, several unintentional mistakes stemming from that choice. The review also says police reports are, quote, missing significant details around the who, what, when, where, and how of the incident. This body cam video showing Potito tell police she had slapped Laundrie. Officers working to figure out her intention.
When you slapped him those times, were you attempting to cause him physical pain or physical impairment? Was that what you were attempting to do to him? What were you attempting to do? What was the reason behind the slapping and stuff? What was it you were attempting to accomplish by slapping?
I was trying to get him to stop telling me to calm down.
Well, it doesn't sound to me like she attempted to injure him.
One officer later wrote in a report that the incident was, quote, more accurately categorized as a mental or emotional health break than a domestic assault.
It's all very interesting to see after the fact, but at the end of the day, both parties involved here are now dead. Does this change anything in terms of the legal implications in this case?
If anything, what it does change, it changes the need for change inside of that city, inside of that state. They don't have certain procedures in place of how to respond to certain domestic violence situations. The biggest mistake that happened, again, it wasn't intentional, is more because of lack of experience. The most important thing is that when you're dealing with domestic violence cases, those cases can go from a regular just screaming at someone to a homicide in a matter of minutes.
The review highlights that there's no way to know whether the outcome would have been different if police filed a more thorough report. After the police encounter, Potito and Laundrie were simply separated for the night before continuing on their cross-country road trip, mere days before Potito would be strangled, weeks before her body found. Now, it's important to highlight Moab, Utah is a rural community that sees a fraction of the domestic violence cases that other big cities like New York or DC might have. And so while the review said that the police officers acted out of empathy and kindness, they simply weren't adequately trained enough to tackle a domestic violence case like this. And so the police department says that they're taking the recommendations from the review, adding new policies, adding a new domestic violence specialist, new trainings, new standards around taking the statement from 911 calls or taking photos of injuries while on site reporting to something like this so that in the future their officers can better respond to a domestic violence case like we saw with Potito and Laundrie.
All right, great points there. Maura Barrett, thank you so much.
This week on his podcast, Into America, NBC's Tremaine Lee got a sneak peek at a new documentary called The Sun Rises in the East. He spoke with the husband and wife team behind the film, which introduces a new generation to the forgotten history of a well-known part of Brooklyn.
We were taught that our blackness was beautiful.
We are the original Wakanda children.
The film is called The Sun Rises in the East. It's a loving chronicle of a community organization in central Brooklyn known as the East. It's produced and directed by first-time documentary filmmakers Cynthia Gordy-Agiwa and her husband, Tayo Giwa, co-founders of Black-Owned Brooklyn.
The East was dedicated to the principles of self-determination, nation building, and Pan-Africanism, which is this idea, of course, that all people of African descent have a common interest and should be unified.
Founded in the late 1960s by young educators and students, the East sought to create institutions by and for Black people.
It was history in the making. It was a mecca. It was home, and it was a revolution.
The centerpiece of the East was its school, Uhuru Sasa, or the Freedom Now School, where Black children were taught to see in themselves what white society often refused to.
We had 25, 30 people taking Black history class. We had sewing classes and other classes that the community at that time identified that they would like to have. So this told us that if we could do this and it could be successful, that we could, in fact, develop our own types of schools.
Jitu Weusi is the charismatic educator and social justice leader whose vision guided the East.
Do I hear you?
G2 was dynamic, and he had a charisma to him, and so we really want to make sure that we impressed that on people, that this was a significant figure in the Black Power movement.
Thank you, sister.
He left the group in 1977, and without his influence, the East gradually faded away. Weusi died in 2013, but his legacy lives on.
He was a visionary who believed in them and sort of pushed people into roles that, you know, they didn't necessarily see for themselves. And many of the people that he encouraged have had lifelong careers.
It is a living, active legacy that people maybe take for granted, or people don't even know that the way that Brooklyn looks and feels is directly related to this liberation movement that the East set into motion.
What's the big takeaway or lesson that you hope viewers take away from it?
This is Black history. It's rooted in Brooklyn, but we think that this is a bigger story. It's a human story, and it's a story that we think can inspire, you know, people all over.
So fascinating. It's an area people know well, but a history people don't know well at all.
Yeah, exactly. Also, it's so cool what Tremaine has done with this podcast. I mean, the conversations that he has, whether they are something like this that you've never heard of or right on the money right now we're talking about, it's really neat.
Yeah, shining a light on important stories. And you can listen to this latest episode of Into America wherever you get your podcasts. Check it out. Coming up, living her best life even without hot water or plumbing.
Up next on Morning News Now, we'll talk to a woman who traded a one-bedroom flat for a 32-foot boat and why she says the sacrifice is worth it. Welcome back. There's some good news this morning and relief for nearly 66,000 people who had defaulted on their student loans. Navient, one of the largest student loan servicers, reached a settlement with 39 states to cancel $1.7 billion in private loans. It's also going to pay those states $145 million. Now, the company was accused of lending to vulnerable students who were likely to default and not encouraging cheap, flexible payment options. Officials say the agreement takes care of all 6 outstanding state lawsuits. Now, as part of the settlement, Navient denies it broke the law and says the decision came down to avoiding, quote, additional burden, expense, time, and distraction. But good news for a lot of people this morning. Now, every month, when it's time to pay rent or your mortgage, it's not so fun to watch that money leave your account. Now, that motivated one woman to find an alternative. She decided to start living on a boat.
Elizabeth Earle purchased her first boat in 2019 and says she has managed to live on just $350 a month. She thinks she's saved more than $27,000 on bills so far. And Elizabeth joins us now from her boat, of course, in Manchester, England. Elizabeth, good morning. Good to have you with us. I mean, I guess we first ask, what made you decide to make this purchase, to renovate a boat? Is it about money, about the lifestyle, a little of both?
First off, thank you so much for having me. I think the answer is I need a lot of therapy, to be honest. I think I got the sailing bug years ago, and I just wanted to live my life, collect adventures, and, you know, I'm a banker's worst nightmare. I'm a self-employed single artist. There is no way I can buy a house solo. So buying a boat and making some compromises was the next best thing.
And by the way, that picture from when you first bought it, that's a little intimidating. Yeah. You had a lot of work to do on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of sleepless nights, and a lot of wine might have been consumed after I bought that boat. And, I had to pretend to my mom a lot that things were going to be okay. Each time I see her, she's like, "Are you all right, love?" And I don't know. It's so cold. But yeah, it's been a lot of work. And when COVID hit, it was even harder because the workforce who would usually come on weren't allowed to, and I had to move in with my mum and dad as a 30-something-year-old woman. I want to be an independent woman to make them proud, and you know, given a curfew to go to bed at 10 p.m. It's not really what you want from your life as an adult. But you know, living on a boat, it was the next best thing, and I'm so glad that she's at this point. She's still not finished, but I don't know if you've ever lived with your parents as an adult. I love them. I love your mum and dad. But getting some independence back during COVID, I don't care what states it's in. I don't care if it's cold water. I don't care that I have to live like a Victorian. It's fine. I'm living my best life.
And also sounds like a great HGTV special.
For real. I know. I'd like to see the whole process of that. By the way, I know you're coming to us from your boat, as Joe mentioned, so that's why we have some spotty Wi-Fi issues, but it's actually working pretty well. So you're in England now, but where's the best place that you've ever docked? Because we know you've moved around.
Yeah, so, I mean, boat-wise, because I used to be crew on a sailboat, I crossed the South Atlantic with no experience whatsoever. That's how I first got the taste of sailing life. So I could say something cool like St. Helena, but I think canal boat-wise, the best place I've ever docked is home. Everyone can relate to that feeling of getting over a journey. I did the cruise here over a long stretch over like 2 months. I took my time, and the best thing I ever got was to get back to, you know, where I live in the countryside near my family, so I could be with them, be with my dog, and you know, and get settled, because that's why I got the canal boat. I used to live on a sailboat, and I adopted a street dog, and turns out she hated sailing, so I got a canal boat as a compromise, and she still hates it, but we're getting there. It's fine.
That's good to hear. And even on a boat, there's no place like home. You know, I mean, this probably isn't for everyone. So anyone who might be looking at this and thinking, well, I'm interested, what are the major sacrifices? What do you have to give up? Cooking, showering, what do you got to do?
Your dating life is impossible. That's one thing. It's impossible. I don't know what to talk to people about. Guys don't want to talk about your canal boat or your porta potty or pole or go collect kindling with you. It's awful. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm never going to give my mother grandkids. I don't know. So there's that. The other compromise is like, you know, hot water. When I was cruising here, I had to do it old school. I would heat up water on my log burner, and I'd sit in a dog paddling pool and use a camping shower. And I think I'll catch myself and look at myself and think, what am I doing? But the trick is, whenever you're doing something that's challenging or tough, to couple it with something fun, like a glass of wine or some chocolate or some music or a fun podcast. It's just like I'm my own main character in an adventure book. So, yeah.
Oh, that's
you know what?
neat.
Despite these challenges, I think this appearance is only going to help your dating life.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Also, they're probably intimidated because look at you redoing the boat, sailing the boat. That's the issue.
If you know someone, let me know.
We will.
Maybe that'll be a challenge here. Let's set you up, Elizabeth.
All right. Elizabeth, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. We really appreciate it, and we wish you all the best.
Yes, enjoy. So neat. All right.
Thank you so much.
Now it's time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Silvana Henao is to follow that. Silvana, good morning.
Hey guys, good morning. So the CEO of MasterCard says consumer spending trends look relatively positive so far this year, following strong holiday numbers. He tells CNBC spending will be helped by savings consumers built up during the pandemic. And he says even if COVID cases surge and people don't feel comfortable going into the store, they'll shift that spending online. Google is expanding its property portfolio in London. It's paying $1 billion to buy the central St. Giles building, where it already occupies several floors. The tech giant is currently waiting for work on its long-delayed UK headquarters to be completed. Google has more than 6,000 employees in the UK and plans to create enough office space for 10,000 in the coming years. And stocks and real estate could be among the investment assets that could be turned into NFTs. That's according to venture capitalist and tech investor Bill Tai. He tells CNBC adoption will pick up as the internet shifts to Web 3.0, a new version of the web that's based on the blockchain technology used to create NFTs and mine cryptocurrencies. Tai says Web 3.0 is the most efficient way to assign ownership of any type of asset. Guys?
Great. So we just won't be able to use the internet anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Until we take a crash course.
They'll have something for us. Thank you, Silvana.
You got it.
All right, now it's time for this week's Good to Know. Today we're talking Girl Scout cookies on demand. That's fun. Lower overdraft fees and soup-scented candles.
Here's our senior and consumer investigative correspondent, Vicki Wynn.
Hey, good morning. You may be starting the new year with a new plan to eat healthier, so double check that salad. Food production company Dole issued a voluntary recall over concerns of listeria contamination. The affected products are iceberg lettuce salad mixes from Dole facilities in Ohio and California. The decision comes after some equipment was found to have traces of listeria, a bacteria that can cause disease. Dole says no illnesses have been reported so far. Potential good news for Bank of America customers. The banking giant is lowering its overdraft fees. Starting in May, the bank says it plans to cut overdraft fees from $35 to $10. It will also stop charging fees for non-sufficient funds. Bank of America is following some online banks like Fidelity and Ally that already do this. We're getting used to a lot of things on demand these days. Sign me up for this one. Girl Scout cookies. Starting in February, DoorDash drivers will deliver Girl Scout cookies to your home. The new agreement means customers nationwide will be able to place orders for pickup or delivery through the DoorDash website or on the app. But you got to act fast. You only have through April of this year to get those orders through. Sometimes a scent is all you need to get comfortable and cozy. Campbell's Soup is releasing 2 of its classic soup scents in the form of candles. I'm not sure how I feel about this. The soup giant partnered with retail brand Camp to sell chicken noodle soup and tomato soup and grilled cheese candles. They're already available online and at select Camp stores that cost $24. The great news here, 10% of the net proceeds will benefit Feeding America. For News Now, I'm Vicki Wynn, and that's Good to Know.
Then when the candle melts, it's actually soup, and you can just drink. I'm kidding, it's not.
Would you burn it?
It's not. No.
Yeah,
No.
Weird, right?
No.
They're cute, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Weird.
Nope.
All right, coming back, pulling back the curtain.
Up next, a new documentary putting a spotlight on what has been a difficult time for Broadway. We're going to take a sneak peek next on Morning News Now.
2022 has begun with more uncertainty for Broadway. After last summer's big reopening, COVID-19 has yet again forced many shows to take a break or close.
A new PBS documentary takes viewers behind the curtain with a closer look at the Great White Way's turbulent year. It's called Great Performances Reopening, the Broadway Revival. Take a listen.
Broadway is also strong.
It's a family.
Broadway is my home. I am actually home when I'm on stage.
Joining us now is the film's host and executive producer, Frank Delella, who knows Broadway better than pretty much anyone. Frank, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Good to have you with us. I mean, this really shows how challenging, honestly, the last 2 years have been for so many performers and others who work on these shows. What did they tell you about how they've been doing?
Well, first and foremost, it's so great to be with you guys this morning. I'm a huge fan, so thank you for having me on the show. You know, Broadway shut down literally overnight in March of 2020, and these folks were out of work immediately. Broadway was the first to shut down, and it was the last to come back. So in this documentary, you see those lights finally go back on. You see those curtains finally rise, and it's emotional. You know, getting to be with these folks in the rehearsal room as they were inching their way towards the reopening nights. It was very emotional for me to watch, and it was emotional for them to experience.
Absolutely. And now the documentary also takes viewers behind the scenes in the week right before Broadway officially reopened. I know lots of people probably remember those viral videos of standing ovations and packed audiences. I know, Joe, you got to actually experience some of that firsthand.
I was there on the first night of Waitress when that reopened.
Yeah, it was so
great.
cool to hear about that. I think maybe some people who just saw them online might not have realized what a massive undertaking it was to get to that moment. I mean, what do you hope viewers take away from watching all that hard work right before that big moment?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I hope they take away is that they go out and buy a ticket for a Broadway show, because Broadway needs audiences more than ever. I have to say, you know, I've been back at the theater. I was there, Joe, that night when Waitress came back. And wasn't that amazing? I mean, literally every single actor walking onto that stage got entrance applause. I mean, I remember props getting entrance applause. So I just hope people go out and, you know, realize that the performing arts are essential. The arts are essential. And if you think about it, you know, artists got us through the pandemic. Think about all the artists who were on Netflix or who we listen to on, you know, Spotify and iTunes. You know, these are essential workers in my mind. And I hope people just go out and buy a ticket to a Broadway show, because it's safe to see a show.
And even that announcement to turn off your cell phone got an ovation that night. Frank, we're tight on time here, but real quick, what is one of your favorite moments in the documentary?
I have to say, listening to Adrienne Warren kind of talk about how she rediscovered Tina. You know, that was a real brilliant performance. She won the Tony Award for that finally this past September. So to watch her get back on stage was very emotional to watch.
That is great to hear. Frank, thank you so much. And I'm definitely going to be checking this out. And you can too. You can watch great performances reopening the Broadway revival on Tuesday, January 18th. It's at 9 p.m. Eastern on PBS. Frank, thanks again for that.
Congrats.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.